Art and Fry are seen alone together. Art asks Fry if he really wanted to fight, to which Fry replies, "Of course, all that traveling is making me rusty." Art then asks why he wanted to fight. Fry then snaps his fingers at Art, telling him that he wanted to gain Onii-chan points while winking. Art then agrees to the fight if it means making Fry stronger. Fry instantly disappears and reappears behind Art, telling him, "Here I come." He then unleashes a powerful uppercut of his sword attack to Art, which Art manages to deflect. Fray's powerful attack could be seen from the skies. "Amazing! You survived my attack. I knew it. You really are strong," said Fry as he smiles. Art, on the other hand, was checking the spot Fry hit him on, noting what a terrifying slash, and that it was a one move that was equivalent to getting hit by a cannonball. Art then focuses his stance, thinking that he needed to start getting serious. Fry sees this and realizes that Art was becoming serious. Fry then takes a step back, and instantly leaps towards Art, telling him he was going to speed up. A mad flurry of attacks came from Fry towards Art, but Art manages to deflect and attack according to Fray's attacks. Their attacks seemed to miss each other and made it look like they were on equal footing. But a sweat drop appears on Fray's face as he realized that Art was stronger than he thought, and that not even a single attack landed on him. Fry then unleashes another terrifying blow, saying, "You won't lose. For my honor as the heir of the Isfeel family." As they continued to exchange blows with one another, Fry thinks about how if they show any form of weaknesses, the other families could exert political pressure against them, and hence, as the first son of the Isfeel family, he needed to be stronger than anyone else, in order to protect both his family and people, and in order to protect Urk. Just as Fry was thinking about going all out, he wondered where Art's limits were, but Art calls out to him. He tells Fry not to hold back and to wear him down. Fry hears this and decides that he won't hold back, summoning a huge ice flower in the skies above the two of them. Ramon was in the mansion when a loud noise throws him off guard. He looks out the window and sees the huge ice flower in the fields where Fry and Art were. Ramon wonders if it was Fray's doing and that he had came back unannounced. Fry explains to Art, who had been crushed by the frozen flower, that he could use bestowal magic with refrigeration to create ice. Ramon thinks about Fray's magic, about how that ice and its temperature in the air was lowered to condense the water vapor into ice, which was then formed into a weapon. But cracks soon started to appear in the flower frozen. Art had broken out of it without a single injury. Fry and Ramon were surprised to see that he had smashed the ice magic flower. Fry remarks about how amazing Art was and asked how he did it. Art then tells him that it was nothing special, as he just used his bestowal magic called friction to heat his sword and melt the ice. Ramon analyzes Art's words and noted that since magical ice is strong enough to shatter steel, however magical heat counters it. Ramon remarks how very clever. Fry looks at Art in amazement and noted that he sees why Urk took an interest in him. But Art replies nervously at the comment and mentioned that he and Urk had only met recently and thinks only about being useful to Urk. Both of them soon regained their serious game faces and lunge at one another at great speed. As their blades collide, Fry thinks about being an ultra-cool big brother, while Art thinks about paying back his debt. They stare at one another seriously once again, and began their flurry of attacks against each other once more. Fry shouts out that this is interesting, very interesting. Art tells Fry that he was quite strong as he had never seen these techniques before. Fry smiles and thinks that Art was still holding back. He then tells Art that he was only at 70% of his power capacity as the sky starts to darken. A huge godly wolf with white eyes soon appear behind Fry as he tells Art that he will get serious. A calm and serious look was in Fray's eyes as mist appears all around them. He takes a serious fighting stance, recalling that in the distant past during the war between the gods and titans, a titan was known as the Great Wolf amassed fathomless power in a bid to destroy the gods with its prey in its sights. With one decisive blow its jaws rent the earth asunder and devastated the world. Fry then rushes towards Art with his god wolf as its attack was called Fenrir. Art sees this and begins to stand in his sword stance. It is said that a master is someone who becomes one with their technique. With a single technique in their whole being, they give their all to courageously strive forward, to transcend the limits of human reason. With a single swing of his blade, Art cuts through everything from Frey's Fenrir attack to even splitting the heavens into two. Art's sword breaks as he points the broken blade into Frey's face. Art was disappointed that his sword had broken and needed to still improve. Art recalls that the technique he used was a technique of the primordial creation which he discovered in the royal capital's archives and had diligently worked on improving it. Frey's face was filled with shock, but his son chuckles then laughs while slapping his face. He tells Art that he had one and that he was really strong. But Art refutes his statements and told Frey that if he didn't use magic he would have lost. Frey calls Art a good guy and thought about how Art had targeted the blade of his sword in order not to hurt him. Tet then arrives onto the scene and calls out to the both of them. He greets Frey about how long it had been and wondered if they were training swords again, as expected of a royal knight. Tet added. Art was shocked to hear the words royal knight. Frey then formally introduces himself to Art. He was the first chair of the Royal Knights Magic Academy, and the vice captain of the Royal Knights Isfeel Frey. He then winks at Art telling him that he was basically the captain already and that he should keep it a secret, as only the king and Isfeel family knew about it. Disgusting, said a voice as a hand smacks a teacup away. We are now back in the horrible Rubdu house where a servant is apologizing to Wendy. She bits her nail thinking about where Art was and why her father had thrown him out. Her father then appears from behind the door wondering what the matter was. Wendy points at the servant and tells her father Lates to fire him, but Lates tells her that she would have fired the 10th servant so far and wondered if they were all that terrible. But Wendy screams at him telling Lates that they were all awful and how she hated this while wishing that Art was still here. Lates then informs her that there will be no end to the substitutes if they were meant to replace Art. But more importantly he informs her that the royal ball was in 3 days. Hearing this made Wendy happy to know that the royal ball was still taking place. Lates confirms it and thinks about how Wendy should be considering marriage as well as she dances around the room happily. She then opens the wardrobe which reveals a dark dress. She hugs it as it was a wonderful dress that Art had made for her, leaving the rest up to him. Urk is seen sipping tea in a beautiful garden. Just as Frey enters and shouts out loud, saying Urk, my dear beautiful sister, I'm home. But Urk looks at him in disgust. Frey continues to be happy and tears flow from his face as he shouts out Urk, aiming for a hug from her. But she ignores him and greets Art instead, causing Frey to slam into the ground. With blood dripping from his nose, Frey continues to call out to Urk saying her brother was here. But Urk continues to ignore him as Art thinks of their relationship as an odd one. Art then asks Urk about her request for today, which she informs him that she had gathered medicinal herbs for an orphanage. Frey was screaming in joy over hearing his sister's voice in the background. Hearing that she helped an orphanage, Art couldn't help but feel worthless. Urk then reminds him that he had helped them with the laundry and beds. Frey was shocked to hear this. Urk then tells Art that they should take it slowly together, putting one foot in front of the other. Hearing this angers Frey as he tells Art that they should duel again as he had just heard something that he can't condone as a brother. Hearing the word again catches Urk's attention as she stares with an intense glare. She yells at Frey asking if he was bullying Art, but Frey nervously tells her to stop it as he didn't do it, but an angry aura still arose from Urk as Frey tried to deny her claims. Big brother, I hate you, yelled Urk, which broke Frey. He collapses onto the ground saying it was all over and that his world had come to an end. Ramon then enters asking what the ruckus was all about. Frey calls him daddy and tells him that Urk said she hated him. Ramon then tells him to say sorry, to which Frey didn't want to do. Ramon then asks why he was home as there must be a reason for it. Frey then tells him that he had a message to deliver, and with a serious look he informs him that it was about that event. Art was curious about what event it was, but Ramon deflects the topic and asks what their plans were for the royal ball. Urk looked unhappy as she tells him that she didn't want to go, but Ramon reminded her that the Duke had requested for her audience. Art thinks about how the royal ball was a gathering where all of nobility get to strengthen their ties. Frey and Tet then declined the invitation to attend the ball as they were busy, which shocks Ramon as he was the one asking. The three of them then started thinking about who could attend in their stead. They needed someone who was reliable, had proper etiquette, and someone whom Urk could rely on. They all gaze at Art, causing him to fluster. Urk looks at him and decides that if Art was going she would go. Hearing this made Art blush. Tet then agrees with the decision as Art would be the perfect candidate to be a bodyguard to Urk and a representative for Fry. He then asks Art if he could represent the Isfil family. Art took a moment to think and wondered if he could be useful to Urk. He then bows his head and agrees to take on the duty, making Urk happy as she tells him that she appreciates it. Urk then returns to the mansion as she needed a dress to be made. The head maid appears and informs Urk that she had grown again as she measures Urk's body. She blushes upon hearing those words and tells her not to say it. The head maid then informs her that since Art had arrived her chest has gotten even bigger. She then advises her that when a woman becomes aware of a man, their body will imitate certain developments. Essentially the woman wishes for the man to view her as a woman. Hearing this causes Urk to blush heavily as she wondered who she wanted to view her as a woman. But soon Art's face appeared in her mind. She was shocked and wondered why she had imagined his face. The head maid giggles and mentioned that they needed to have her bust enlarge. She whispers to Urk and asked if they needed Art's assistance, but Urk brushes her off calling her a fool and that it was not needed, but the head maid teases her saying that they just needed him to adjust her size. The two of them continue to argue about Art. Ramon is then seen asking about that event. Fry informs him about the eclipse locusts that he had brought up at an inappropriate time. Roman noted that it was taking place this year too and that every few years, they would make an appearance in millions destroying land and villages they sweep across the country. Fry tells him that the locusts had already struck Paul. Ramon notes that he was already informed, to which Fry expected as he was more updated than the Lord Chancellor. Roman replies that the Lord of Paul was a friend and asked what he thought of Art. Fry responds that he thinks of Art as a good and honest kid who was a genius that was born only once every 1,000 years. But Ramon felt bad about Art's past history, which was incredibly harsh. Fry was glad they found him as the bed he made was dangerously comfortable. Roman then tells Fry to leave the locusts to him and wanted Tet's report on the house of Rub Edo. Tet reported to them that the former staff had told him about a dark rumor, which tells them that the Rub Edo family had access to large sums of money from unauthorized sources, which were perhaps illegal businesses or other risky ventures. Roman hears this and thinks deeply, hoping that nothing happens. Night arrives and a carriage is seen in the forest. Art and Urk were sitting inside of the carriage. Urk had a sad expression on her face as she looks out the window. She then calls out Art's name. She touches the window and tells him that nobles are troublesome people. Hearing this made Art sad as he looks at her. He then calls out to Urk, who asks him what is it. He tells her that she looked beautiful. But URL tells him not to flatter her as the dress didn't fit, but Art tells her that she looks like a goddess. He then takes her hand and kneels before her, telling her that he swears to protect her no matter what may come. Urk and Art stare at each other as Art had decided for himself that he won't be anyone's puppet. And that he was sure it would be fine for now, just as the carriage heads to a castle in the horizon. Urk and Art soon arrive in front of a giant door of a mansion with guards stationed outside. Art looks at Urk, who showed an uncomfortable expression on her face. He stares at her deeply before bringing out a perfume bottle, to which he casts cleanse and enchant perfume on her. He asks her if that had helped calm her down, to which Urk just stares at him. He then bows in front of her, asking if she would be so kind as to allow him to escort her. She gives a faint smile and says gladly. They soon enter the mansion with their arms intertwined with one another. The other nobles see Urk walking through and commented that she was as beautiful as an angel, and that Art wasn't too shabby himself. Urk felt embarrassed and thought of somebody who didn't come, but Art tells her not to worry, and informed her that he was here after all. Urk blushes as she hears those words from Art. The musicians in the hall began to play music. Urk and Art soon started to look around and noticed that the people around them were dancing. Art then calls out to Urk, offering his hand, and asked if he could have the pleasure of dancing with her. The both of them smile at one another before Urk agrees and holds his hand. They held each other close as they danced to the tune of the music. The more they danced together, the more embarrassed and shy they felt towards one another, which they noticed, but they soon laughed it off together and continued to happily dance to the music. Just as they were dancing, a lady notices them from afar. A lady rushes into Art's body and hugs him, interrupting the dance between him and Urk. Art was surprised by this sudden action. He recognizes her as Her Highness Leah, who tells him that they finally got to meet. Was stunned to see this as Art asks her to release him from her hug. Leah calls Art a wonderful person, which confuses both Art and She then recites the fact that Art was the one to save her Leah Drad from a dragon's wrath and was her knight in shining armor. She then tells him that she couldn't hold in her eagerness to meet him. Then interjects into the conversation. She asks Art why he had never tell her about this, but Art apologizes as he thought it wasn't important. Leah then recommends they go somewhere quieter first. Wendy had soon arrived in the hall wearing the black dress that Art made and was carrying a black fan with her father behind her. She walks through the hall as the people around her wonder why it was nosier than usual, and that it was because the princess had made an appearance. But Wendy was focused on what they were thinking about the dress that Art made, and if they couldn't take their eyes off her now. She then talks to her father wondering about which of the nobles had he picked to be her fiancé. Lates then points to a certain individual that was her future husband, but shock was written in her eyes as she sees where he pointed. Lates tells her that her finance was young Mr. Freyman Daigle, who was a large man stuffing his face full of food at a table, with shattered plates around and pieces of food on the ground. Wendy was taken back by the sight of this. She quickly turns to her father asking if he was kidding and that there was no way she could be with such an unsightly pig. But Lates immediately slaps her right in her bitchy face. Lates nervously laughs out loud and apologies to Freyman for the noise, and stated that Wendy was talking about the food. Wendy was in shock as she held the spot where her father had slapped her. She though about how it was the first time he had hit her just as Lates recommend they meet Freyman in the kitchen. Freyman's face was revealed up close with sauces on his face. He calls out to Wendy as his fiancée and tells her to come here. Wendy tears up upon seeing this horrible scene, as her black fan remains on the ground. Back to our favorite group, asks Leah and Art how they were acquainted. Art explains to her that he had some business in the royal capital while Leah commented that he looked so cool when he defeated the dragon. Was a bit disappointed to hear this as it made her think that Art was nice to everyone. Leah then asks him if the thing she had sent was useful in his happenings. But Art was confused and asked what the thing she was talking about was. Leah then explained that she had sent a large number of gold bars from the royal treasury that she had permitted him to have, but Art continued to give a blurred look which Leah notices. She then asks if he didn't receive it, to which Art replies that he was sorry as he does not remember such a thing. Leah then changes the topic as she could send something else later and asked why and Art had come to the party together. As they explained their reasoning to her, Leah realizes that she had been found out. She thinks about how love is blind, but Art doesn't even realize, just as he calls out to her. She grabs onto his arm asking him if he was free after this and if he would like to visit her place, but joins in by grabbing his other arm, telling her that Art couldn't go as he was her butler. The two of them argue as others watch while Leah tells that Art would be happier by her side, but refuses, saying that Art should decide. As they argue, a black dress is seen dashing by. Wendy was running away thinking that she refuses to be with a pig-like man and that she would rather die than marry him. But she soon trips on the carpet and falls flat on the ground. She begins to tear up thinking if only Art was here. As she lay on the ground with tears in her eyes, she overhears and Leah arguing with one another. She then spots Art's flustered face between the two girls. Her face was filled with shock and then anger as she calls out Art's name, which he hears. "There you are!" she yelled as she walked towards them. Leah and Art were all stunned to see Wendy in front of them. Thanks for watching the latest part from the voice of Manhwa. Subscribe for more content and don't forget to comment below what you want to see in the future. Like and share for more.